Hey listeners, it's almost Valentine's Day, and I want to share a story about unconditional love. Love comes in many forms. There's love between a person and their boo or significant other. Then there's also love that exists between parents and their children, so on and so forth. This story is a true story and is very dear to one of my listeners. I hope y'all enjoy. And remember to share, like, and subscribe. I'm always looking for good stories, so feel free to send them to pocketsizedtales@gmail.com or catch me on Facebook. They also don't have to be true stories, and I accept all genres. Thanks for listening. A parent's love for their child. Sean was working off his laptop when he noticed his son waving at something in the backyard from their dining room through the sliding glass door. Avery, what are you doing? Who are you waving at? Sean asked his 1-year-old boy, though he was actually closer to 2. Avery was their only child. The boy couldn't talk yet, so he babbled and pointed a lot. Avery knew the concept of hi and bye. He'd wave or point to every stranger and car passing by if he could. Ooh, was all Avery managed to say. Sean glanced out the backyard, but there was nothing there. He concluded his son might have been waving at a squirrel, bird, or maybe even a bug. Their house had 3 bedrooms, and occasionally Avery's parents found him playing in one of the other rooms by himself. At the time, Sean and his wife Na didn't think much of it. This continued for some time, and it was accompanied by Avery waving at random places in a room as he babbled and pointed. They experienced this for the first time when Sean and his wife were putting their son to bed. He kept waving at a corner in the ceiling and pointing at it. However, he didn't look terrified. It was quite the opposite. Avery looked delighted and was smiling. The couple thought it was odd their son behaved in such a manner, but because nothing bad or malevolent ever happened, there was no cause for concern. One summer, Na's cousin Chai visited them from out of town. While everyone was sitting in the living room, Chai asked if they ever experienced any strange behavior from Avery, to which they replied, yes. They explained to him what their son had been going through. The couple heard the cousin had the gift of sight and was a practicing shaman, so they suspected there may be something in their house. Why do you ask? Do you see something? Shang asked. Yes, there is something, or rather someone, that comes and goes, but I can't tell you what questions to ask if you want to know, Chai responded. Shang thought about it, then said, What or who is it? It's someone really close to both of y'all, answered Chai. Shang automatically thought of his deceased father, but it couldn't be since the person had to be close to the couple. Before he could say anything, Na said, Ask him who they are. Chai smiled and his legs started to shake. He started chanting or talking in a language that sounded similar to Chinese, all the while his legs continued to shake. Any outsiders without knowledge of the Hmong culture or religion would have thought the man was mad had they seen him in such a state, for Chai was shaking and appeared to be having a conversation with himself. After about a minute, Chai turned to the couple and asked, Did y'all have any other kids? He said you two are his parents. Na's heart stopped, and her breath caught in her throat upon hearing her cousin's response. She and her husband looked at each other. Chai was just as surprised, though he didn't show it. He never heard of the couple having more than one child, so this was new to him. After a moment, Na finally said something. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Yes, we had another child before Avery, a boy, but he... Na's eyes were red and welled with tears, and her lips shook. He didn't make it, Shang said, finishing his wife's sentence as he held her. Too early. I had him way too early, Na sobbed. I'm sorry, I didn't know, was all Chai managed to say. His eyes were also red from holding back tears of his own. He continued, saying, The boy said his name was Yeshia. Most people didn't know because it was a high-risk pregnancy, so we kept it under wraps and told people on a need-to-know basis. We did not want to get everyone else's hopes up, Shang said. I can understand that, Chai replied. When Na heard the name, she couldn't contain herself and bursted into tears. She had appeared strong in front of so many for so long, but not this time. Distant memories of her first true love flooded back all at once. Shang and Na visited Geshe every day during lunch, since he was born at 26 weeks. Most of the time, they just looked from outside of his billy bed while he underwent phototherapy. The micro baby had an eye mask and the tiniest beanie and diapers the couple had ever seen. He had all sorts of tubes and cables attached to him as he was hooked up to various different machines and monitors that beeped. Occasionally, they were ecstatic when they got to hold, feed, or bathe their baby. Even his little cries were music to their ears, but it broke Na's heart every time her poor baby had to get his blood drawn, which was quite often. The only time the couple were able to spend more time with their son was after work and on weekends, but they'd still have to come home at night. The pain of not being able to be with her precious baby was sometimes too much to bear, so Na would cry as Shang held her to sleep. She couldn't take it knowing their son was all alone with strangers in an unknown place when he should be home with them. It wasn't fair. She knew it was for the best, but that doesn't make it any easier to cope with. They also prayed before bed every night, hoping someday their little family would be together. It was nearly a month when Geshe was able to open his eyes for the first time. That day, the couple were so overjoyed. Unfortunately, a few days after that, Geshe's condition took a turn for the worst. That Saturday morning when the couple visited their son, he was hooked up to a ventilator. The nurse updated the couple on the baby's health. Your son has pneumonia. We've given him some antibiotics and have him on a ventilator in order to help his breathing. We're also monitoring him closely. Don't worry, he's in good hands, the nurse said. The machine was quite loud. Shang wondered how the baby got any sleep. After visiting him for a few hours, they went out to eat. Na cried when they got to the car. Shang stayed positive and did his best to comfort her. The couple went out for lunch that afternoon and planned to head back after they ate. They were in the middle of eating when they got a call. Na's face was serious and nervous. After a few minutes, she hung up. Who was that? Shang asked. That was the hospital, Na answered. Before she could say anything, Shang asked, Is everything okay? Na's eyes began to water, and that told Shang everything he needed to know. She took a moment to gather herself, then said, We should go. I'll tell you on the way. They paid for their meal and gathered their things, then rushed back to the hospital. As Shang drove, Na relayed the message from the hospital to her husband. Geshe was having major complications, so his current hospital was transferring him to a bigger one with better suited facilities. An ambulance was already on its way. They got to the hospital and the nurses and doctors updated them about their son's health. The staff did their best to reassure the couple, but all their faces had grim expressions. About 30 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Na went in the ambulance with the baby while Shang followed with their car. As he drove, he kept hoping and kept positive that some way, somehow, it was all going to be okay. Na texted her husband the room number. He found parking and headed to one of the top floors. When he got there, he was escorted to the room. There were doctors, nurses, and techs rushing in and out of the room with all sorts of machines and devices lined up. People were talking, a few were barking orders, and some called out numbers and acronyms that were foreign to Shang. Machines beeped and phones rang. With all the commotion, the only thing Shang could focus on was the sound of the monitor from his son's room. Na was outside of the room in the hallway. She wasn't crying at the moment, but her eyes were red as if she had just finished crying or was about to break down. Shang could tell she was doing her best to stay strong. He went to her and they embraced. It's going to be okay. Everything will be fine, Shang said to his wife. He wasn't sure if he was saying that to make her feel better or himself. Either way, he felt like he should say something to lift their spirits. Shang couldn't tell how long he'd been there. It seemed like it had been just 5 minutes since he arrived. Then he heard the dreaded flatline tone. Even when the chaplain showed up, Shang was still in a state of shock and denial. The woman asked if they had any religious faith or practices. Shang didn't say anything as he was too dumbstruck. Na just shook her head. It became quieter as the room started to clear out. I'm sorry. If you need anything, please contact me. Anything at all, the chaplain said, handing Shang her card. Her face was filled with concern. The couple thanked her and she took her leave as the doctor was walking up. My name's Dr. Michaels, he said. His face looked defeated. Dr. Michaels took a moment to compose himself, then said, I'm sorry, we did everything we could. The little guy was a fighter, but it was just too much. Let us know if y'all need anything. Dr. Michaels put a hand on Shang's shoulder and took a deep breath, as if he was about to say something. Maybe something to make the couple feel better, but thought better of it and walked off. There was nothing else he could have said. Nothing in the world would have prepared the young parents for this. Nothing could have been said or done to take or at least ease the pain of losing their child. Shang and Na walked into the room. A nurse was waiting for them with their son wrapped up in a blanket. She handed him to Na. "My baby!" Na cried as she took her beloved son into her arms. She wailed with more pain and heartache than she'd ever endured in a lifetime. The nurse apologized and exited the room, closing the door behind her. Shang remained strong up to that point. Then something inside of him broke, and he wept like he's never wept before. The pain was unbearable, even more so than when he lost his father. He felt a huge knot caught in his throat, and his lips quivered. He brushed his son's precious face with the knuckle of his finger. It was soft and warm. He then rubbed his son's head and said, You're such a good boy." Shang barely managed to get the words out as he shook uncontrollably from crying. He continued, You did so good. Daddy's so proud of you. You can rest now. No one will poke you with needles anymore." They each took turns holding their son as they embraced him and each other. All the while, tears and snot ran down their faces, but they didn't care at that point. It was a result of their hopes and dreams being shattered into a million pieces. Their hearts were forever scarred. That was the darkest day of each of their lives. "That was 6 years ago," Na sniffled. Her cousin was also in tears after hearing the tale. Na picked up Avery and kissed him on the forehead, then said, "I hope he's doing well, and tell him I'm sorry I couldn't be a good mother to him. Tell him thanks for everything, and that we love him." Chai wiped his tears and started his chanting routine again. After he was done, Chai said, "Avery's brother chose y'all to be his parents because he knows y'all will take good care of him. They have been brothers since the beginning and have never been separated. He loves his brother very much, so that's why he visits him sometimes. But to answer your question, he's doing well, and he said for you not to blame yourself. He said he knows y'all love him, and he loves y'all too." The couple thanked Chai for communicating their messages to their eldest son. At that moment, Avery started to point across the room as he babbled and smiled. Then Chai said, "Avery thinks y'all can see his brother and is trying to show him to y'all. He said he's going now." And with that, Na got the closure she had been desperately seeking for a long time. Her hope was that maybe in another life they will be family once again.